Hello and welcome to my Twitter. Yep, I've been shadow banned on Twitter again, and my latest Twitter moment has apparently been false flagged. So, yeah, hopefully Twitter will fix this quickly. They usually get to it pretty quickly. Sometimes it takes a few days or so, but yeah, don't know why this keeps happening. But somebody out there wants me to be silenced, apparently. I don't think it's Twitter. I could be mistaken there, but uh, it seems to me that, like I said, they generally do a pretty good job of taking care of it when I point it out to them. So I think it's, probably somebody else false flagging me, and Twitter just hasn't figured out how to, well, stop people from doing things like that and causing interruptions of sorts. Any rate, so this is the homepage of my Twitter. This is my Twitter page, twitter.com/Donald Kronos. And give you a little tour here. Um, Notice my name there, Donald Kronos, actor. I put that on there as a little advertisement because I don't usually do much talking about my work on Twitter, and so it's just kind of to let producers and directors and whatever know that if they're interested, that's the line of work I'm in. That's my career. Little blurb underneath says acting is about action, pretending is about pretense. I'm an actor, not a pretender. Good fiction should entertain people, not fool people. There's a difference. And the reason I wrote that is because a lot of people, when they get into an argument with me on Twitter, they try to win the argument by saying, "Oh, you're an actor, so therefore you're just pretending." Which is really a bad excuse for not coming up with something reasonable to support their position on something. I mean, it's all right to disagree with each other, but talk about it reasonably, be rational. Don't just go, "Oh well, okay, you're wrong because of your career," or because get this, a lot of people will say because of my beard. That makes me wrong. Once in a while, the mustache makes me wrong. And what most of those people don't even realize is that as an actor, I've changed my looks quite a few times for different roles, and I'm not afraid to change it. Anytime, whenever. Right now, I have quite a bit more beard than what's showing up on my beard and mustache than what's showing up on my Twitter profile, and long hair, because if somebody calls me into a job, I can shave any of that off or trim it or cut it or whatever, but it's hard to grow it in a short time. So more versatile that way. Oh, and the thing in the background, that's a straw man. Um, and underneath it says, "So you're saying that Charles Darwin was wrong, even though you have no idea what he said, and therefore this guy created the universe?" Um, and that's sort of it's a play on words in a way. Not exactly sure how to explain this, but there are a lot of people who try to make a claim that uh, God created the universe, that they know this for a fact, that they don't have to present any evidence to back up that fact um, because it's already evident and we all know it and whatever else. They won't even identify which god is theirs. Well, if they can't identify which one is theirs, then any of them could be theirs, and hence there is no such thing as a straw man argument against that particular god, because you can present it any way you want, and it's obviously anything. If they're claiming there's only one god and they don't have a description for that one god, well, then any description at all that you give for their one god should be sufficient. I mean, after all, you could name a pet rock god, and if they claim there's only one god with a capital G, well, then that means there's only one thing named God, and it'd have to be your pet rock then, wouldn't it? So, at any rate, this is my pinned tweet. It says, Bernie Sanders, we the people of the United States of America need balanced ballots with the option to actually vote directly against a candidate. Then those will no longer turn into votes for the lesser of two evils. Read more, and there's a link. And underneath, I've got a little graphic, and I can scroll onto that, or I can just click on it, and that'll open it up here, and move that out of the way, and you can see it's actually something from a survey that Rand Corporation did in 2016, and showing a little bit of the details of the survey. There's more of that on the internet. If you run a search for some of the text in the upper part of that negative vote results from 2016 Rand presidential election panel survey with negative vote questions sponsored by the Negative Vote Association regarding a balanced ballot. And you can see the percentages for and against. And when you subtract them, of course, you subtract the votes against from the votes for, you get a net vote count, which, as you can see, in this particular case, this survey shows a rather small percentage positive for Hillary Clinton once you've done the subtraction, and a rather small percentage negative for Donald Trump once you do the subtraction. Also, a rather small percentage positive for other. Now, they didn't name any particular candidates with regard to other. The choices that were given were for Hillary Clinton, against Hillary Clinton, for Donald Trump, against Donald Trump, for other, against other. And I don't remember all the details of it, but just looking at this, apparently there was also some indication that people could indicate if they wouldn't vote or if they weren't sure. And I added the text on the bottom. A balanced ballot with negative vote support allows people to vote directly against a dangerous candidate so that those who want to prevent one bad outcome are not coerced into casting a lesser of two evils vote toward a different bad outcome. Now I'm going to close that picture up and go ahead and click on this Twitter moment. That opened in another tab. Okay. Closing that tab and going back to where I was. Yeah, I guess it wouldn't have mattered. But I'm going to show you another way to do this anyway. If I click on me and then click on my name here, that'll bring me back to twitter.com/Donald Kronos. And on this page, you can see tweets, following, followers, likes, lists, and moments. Here's 13 moments. If I click on moments, I'll get a list of my Twitter moments. And there's that one right at the top of the list. Please don't vote for the lesser of two evils. And you can see I've got some other ones that are useful Twitter searches, images of the moon's shadow on Earth, Little experiment I did some time back. Actually, did not work out right. As it turns out, there's a limit, or I don't know if there still is, but there was at that time a limit on how many tweets you could put in a moment. And so I went through a whole lot of work and lost a lot of it. Alternative political debates, hashtag alt debate. Bernie in my Twitter polls, USA 2016 presidential primary season elections, anti-vote polls, which 2016 presidential candidate has done the most good for the USA, and Operation Bernard, and that would be my first Twitter moment from when Twitter first introduced that feature. So I'm going to go back here and click on this one. And here it is. Please don't vote for the lesser of two evils. I certainly hope you won't vote for the greater of two evils in any election. But when the population is about equally split as to which one is the greater evil and which one is the lesser evil, can there really be an obvious lesser evil candidate? There's a little piece of that survey image. Do you believe votes intended against the worst candidate in the USA's 2016 presidential general election were actually counted as votes against that candidate and not as votes for a different candidate? I made this poll, didn't get really a lot of votes on it, but made the poll to basically just get people to think about that, because when you vote for the lesser of two evils, you're really not voting against the worst one. You're voting for the second worst. And sometimes in some cases it's not the second worst. It might be the third worst or the fourth worst, but you wouldn't call it the lesser of two evils if you believed it was something good. I mean, simple fact. If you're voting for the lesser of two evils, you're still voting for evil. Now, I'm not saying don't vote, but I am hoping to encourage some people to vote for a good candidate, whether they believe that candidate can win or not, because there are enough of us who won't vote for the lesser of two evils that we could easily outvote all of those lesser of two evils votes if all of us voted. If all of us who were registered voters went and voted, and those of us who wouldn't vote for a lesser of two evil candidate instead voted for a good candidate, even if we didn't all agree with each other, we'd probably be picking who wins. And what's more, the people who are casting those lesser of two evils votes, they usually want something better as well. And if we can make that something better viable by getting out there and voting, then maybe they won't cast so many lesser of two evils votes. Now, we should have the option to vote directly against a candidate so that they would have another way to represent what they're trying to say, even if we don't manage to get enough people to vote for someone good, or if there isn't anyone good available. I mean, sometimes you got an election where one candidate is running uncontested. Uncontested meaning there is no other candidate, not necessarily uncontested meaning that the people don't contest it, because sometimes they very much do. So, okay, here. Voting for the second worst candidate counts as much against a good candidate's, there's a typo there, as it does against other bad ones. Someone else might see the one you think is worse as the second worst. If so, should they vote for that one? Of course not. A vote for the lesser evil is still a vote for evil. Is a vote for evil. Yeah. Thing about Twitter, you can't go back and edit anything. Once you posted it's there. You can delete stuff, but yeah, you can't edit it. So notice I've got a good candidates. A little bad English there. Um, it's both singular and plural at the same time. And here again, another image of a Twitter poll that I did. Twitter polls have their limits. You can only put up to 4 options on them, and very small space in which to type the options. So what I did here is I made a graphic in the question text. I used a couple of Unicode characters to make a graphic for the intended to oppose the election of a candidate I did not want to be president, and intended to support the election of a candidate I really did want to be president. The question is, which of the following best describes your vote in the USA's 2016 presidential general election? So basically, the available options in this case are uh, intended to oppose a candidate, intended to support a candidate, and not applicable, meaning that some people, for example, that don't live in the United States might want to get a look at the poll results before the poll is finished, and the only way they can do that in Twitter is to go ahead and cast a vote. So there they've got a not applicable option. Twitter polls only run for a maximum of 7 days. I'm hoping Twitter will extend that someday, but that's the way they are right now. So within a week after posting a poll, it's available for everyone to see anyway. Here, giving people the option to vote against a candidate doesn't make them want to. The desire to vote against a candidate is common. I'll give you some Twitter search links to look through the results of, so that you can see that for yourself. And this is actually an image of a Twitter search that I did. This isn't one of the Twitter search links, but just as a sort of example. And I've got the text underneath here. People won't fight for the option to vote against a candidate until they realize they don't already have such an option. So please have a look through this thread and share it with others. And here's another example. And under this one, I've got the Twitter search links. I'll start with twitter.com, so you can see they just call on Twitter's server. Unfortunately, there's no preview for them in Twitter. Here's a screenshot as a sample of what a Twitter search looks like in a web browser. Now, some people are using Twitter on their phone or some other device, not on a web browser but on an app. But this is what it looks like in a web browser. And I've got this somewhat zoomed in on my screen to make it easier to see in the video. A little more would fit on the screen at once otherwise. This is a different survey that was done with similar questions having to do with for and against, but this one was aiming at something else. They actually were comparing 2008 with 2016, and question is, what would you say your choice is more a vote for someone or against someone? And basically, what they found is that there were an awful lot of people that did want to actually vote against someone, and of course they were unable to do that. But that in 2016, that was quite a bit higher than in 2008. Practically half the people actually would have rather voted against someone than for someone. And that's a little rare. I mean, usually it's a pretty high percentage of people, but not that high. Following tweets each contain a link to a Twitter search for recent tweets about various people having voted against a candidate. These limited searches will also find some irrelevant tweets, but it's important to note that we need the option to actually vote against someone. Now, here's the this is one of the search links, and if I point at it, you can see the actual URL of the search link. It's trimmed off on the screen otherwise in Twitter, but when you point at it, it expands it out. Just hover the mouse over it, and you can see that's a pretty long link. But Twitter shortens the links down internally so they can fit them in tweets. And of course, the search results themselves. So there's no way you could fit that in that tweet because it's it's a bunch of other tweets. And I'm not going to click on one of these. You can look this up yourself if you want later, and open up this Twitter moment when it's available. If you look for it and it's not available, maybe write a little message to Twitter support and let them know so they can get on the ball and get it done. But I did use one of the Twitter forums, and I sent them a message to let them know. So hopefully it's already taken care of now, or will be soon. So basically, I broke these up into categories because, as you can see, that they're really long search links, and I could only fit so much in, and then Twitter can't handle more in a search. So I had to sort of break these things up, and this also sort of gives people a way to find more of what they're looking for if they're looking for something specific. So in this case, this one is people tweeting about personally having voted for someone, and I don't know if you can see this in here, but I voted against, or we voted against, and then against Trump, or against Obama, or against Hillary, or against John, against Donald, against Clinton, against Nixon. There's a bunch of possibilities in there. And go down to the next one, people tweeting about large numbers of voters having voted against someone. And this one is like more voted, most voted, many voted, the rest voted, millions voted, different things like that. And this one's people tweeting about people in general having voted against someone, people tweeting about groups identified by derogatory terms having voted against someone, people tweeting about those they identify by religion or lack thereof having voted against someone. Now, notice all of these are saying it's about tweets about people having voted against someone, and that's what they are. Now, there may be a few exceptions. Once in a while, you'll run into a tweet where somebody's actually saying that, that they wish they could vote against someone, and they recognize that they can't. But for the most part, people talk about their intended vote against someone as if it was actually cast as a vote against someone. And there's just no option to do that right now. We should have such an option. And this is one of the things I'm trying to raise awareness of, is the fact that this needs to be talked about. That people need to talk about the fact that that we're lacking that option, and not just pretend that we already have the option, because we don't. And having it would make a huge difference in the quality of candidates we're able to elect to government offices for our supposedly representative democracy. And we do have a few politicians who really do try to represent the people. The vast majority, unfortunately, it seems, are more interested in representing their big money donors and not the general public. And that's that's good in some ways, because those big money donors, hey, they're successful. They've shown that they can get stuff done. Yeah, it's nice to listen to them and maybe help them get some more stuff done. But you know what? There are other people who also have good ideas and have skills and would like to be able to get stuff done. And with all the wealth and the power in the hands of a few people, it's holding back a lot of what we could have. So we need to equalize things a little. We need to put some of the power back in the hands of the people where it belongs. Any rate, so moving on, I'm just going to skim through these and not read all of them, because there's a bunch of them. And here, something else. Oh, this is people tweeting about independence, free of political party membership or affiliation, having voted against someone. And this one says, so there's all this talk about having voted against some specific political candidate, yet no option on the ballot to actually cast such a vote. We can easily understand what these people meant, but it's not what they said. They say voted against, but they mean something like did the next best thing to voting against. Many voters decide the next best thing is to not vote at all. Some decide to be brave and fight against the odds by voting for a good candidate. Some actually write in an anti-vote. Now, what's meant by that is, for example, in 2012, the 2012 presidential election, I wrote in against Mitt Romney. There were a lot of people in 2016 that told me that they wrote in against Hillary Clinton or against Donald Trump or some variation of that, like anybody but Trump or not Hillary Clinton. Those are write-in anti-votes, and here in California, those votes are thrown out as spoiled. I've been fighting to try to get that changed, because several people at the Secretary of State's office have told me that, yes, they very much do know what people mean by those votes. They understand that that's intended as a vote against a specific candidate, but they don't have any way to count it. Well, that's what negative numbers are for. So, yeah, I would say if they understand what the vote was what was intended, a subtractive vote that brings the net vote of that candidate one lower than it would have been otherwise, then that's exactly how it should be counted. And I don't think there's actually any legislation that should stop them from being able to do that. If there is, that should be overturned. But I think they're kind of waiting to see some actual legislation that openly gives them permission to do it, which to me seems sort of backward. That to wait for permission to do what you should be doing anyway. Okay, this one says, of course, a write-in anti-vote or negative vote, such as against Hillary Clinton or against Donald Trump, isn't counted in most states, and isn't counted as the subtractive vote intended in any state yet. But better to cast a protest vote than to let your dissent be silenced. What I mean by that is, if your dissent is going to be silenced anyway, if you can't voice your dissent and have it counted in an election, at the very least, try to say something. Try to get it out there, and at the very least, if you don't see anyone you want to vote for, and you write in a vote against someone, if anybody says it's your fault who got elected, you can tell them no. I didn't vote for that person because you didn't. Um, and yeah, there are people who are going to blame everybody but themselves, no matter what. Especially the people who cast lesser of two evils votes, like to blame everybody but themselves for the fact that we got one of the two that pretty much everybody was calling the lesser of two evils. And there's the thing, it's two of them, and people don't agree on which one is the lesser. So I don't know why they think that those of us who don't agree with them, that who don't have an opinion one way or the other on which one is the worst, or aren't sure enough of which one's worst, or actually have a good candidate we'd like to support, why should we do what they want us to do and vote for the candidate that they think is the lesser of two evils? Well, there's just as many people telling us to vote for the candidate they think is the greater of the two evils, because those other people think that one's the lesser. So the way I see it, the best we can do is to each fight for the option to cast a vote against a candidate, so that people have less reason to want to cast such a vote. Well, in the meantime, we should insist on voting for the best candidate we know of, regardless of the odds. This is my opinion, of course. Finally, for those with the patience to sift through it, here's a link to a more inclusive search for tweets about voting against. We need such an option for elections to be at all fair or democratic. And here's another link. And this one brings up a lot of irrelevant hits. But that's why I put on there, for those with the patience to sift through it. But it'll also find a lot of the tweets about voting against someone that those other searches would have missed. When you open one of the Twitter searches I've given links to, you should see the search string in Twitter's search box. You can modify it if you like. You can modify it if you would like to make your own variation, and feel free to share that if you prefer. I'm not sure. There's something wrong with the way I typed that. You can modify that if you like. I think there should be a comma there to make your own variation, and feel free to share it if you prefer. Share that meaning that your modified one. And here's just a screenshot of what one of those Twitter searches look like, not in the URL, but actually in Twitter. And here's one of my signs. Please advocate for the right to vote for or against any political candidate in all future elections. And a little note, I hope you do your own research. Join the fight for the option to vote against scary or corrupt candidates when no good candidates can be found. And of course, encourage others to do likewise. Try to vote when you can, but please not for a candidate you don't seriously want elected. There's got to be a better choice than casting a vote for the lesser of two evils, especially when about half the people think that one's the greater evil. And this actually this link goes to the first tweet in the thread, the one that up until today for quite a while now has been my pinned tweet, and I replaced it with that slightly more colorful one. And here's another one of my signs. Bernie Sanders, we need a political revolution. Right now, he's running for his Senate re-election. I do hope he runs for president in 2020. If he doesn't, I'll vote for him anyway because I really don't expect there to be any other candidate that good available. And if there's somebody close to as good and they're on the ballot and he's not, okay, then I'll bend a little to try to uh, get us the best we can get. But I'm not going to vote for a lesser of two evils candidate. If the only viable options, if the only seemingly viable options I've got are bad options, then I'm going to try to make some other option viable. And I hope other people hearing me say that will say, yeah, that makes sense, and decide to do that too. So, a vote for the best candidate is a vote against both the lesser evil and the greater evil. Don't settle for the lesser of two evils. Vote for the best. At least then you won't be helping a bad candidate beat a good one, or or a bunch of good ones. And here's a little tweet that says, if you're interested in a Facebook group that will never stop supporting Bernie Sanders, here's one. And there's a link to it. Um, uh, it's one of my groups, so that's why. A lot of groups out there started out as Bernie Sanders groups and switched over to Jill Stein or to the Democratic Party or something like that. Basically, uh, as soon as Bernie didn't get the Democratic Party nomination. Now he has been an independent for many years. He's still an independent. Yes, he tried to get the Democratic Party's nomination, and the Democratic Party cheated him out of that. Um, but he's still an independent, and I think that's a heck of a lot better than Democrat or Republican. And yeah, don't get me wrong, those two parties have a lot of power, and as such, because they have a lot of power, I do wish that they would get their act together and start working for the people. Um, but I don't think that's really likely to happen. Not until we have the right to vote against them, anyway, because they have no incentive. Okay, this is a little tweet about evolution, evolution of systems, evolution of syntax, evolution of supply, evolution of suits, evolution of schools, evolution of scarcity, evolution of SMS, evolution of smoke, evolution of smarts, evolution of sketch. These are things you can actually run searches on the internet for any one of these. Evolution of sharing, evolution of saws, evolution of Satan, evolution of safety, evolution of Santa, evolution of sand. Evolution is nothing more than the accumulation of change. It's a process of change adding up. That's it. That's all evolution is. And yes, there are a lot of details to theories of evolution in specific fields, especially in the field of biology, where evolution can get rather complicated in exactly how it works. But what it is the same thing as in any other field. It's still that process of change adding up. And the fact that there's natural selection involved, or sometimes uh, human selection involved, um, the fact that there is biochemistry involved, the fact that there's all these other things involved in biological evolution makes the exact study of it rather complex. What's more, uh, a lot of people confuse the history of biological evolution with the process of biological evolution. Uh, what I mean by that is, for example, whether say monkeys evolved from rats or from bats or from lizards or from uh, fungus or whatever the case might be. I'm not saying I don't know. I'm just saying if whether you know or you don't know what it is that some particular thing evolved from. That's a matter of history, and the information on that is recorded by nature. That's why it's called natural history. But that is history. That's not the process. The process is simply the accumulation of change. And that's the same regardless of what evolved from what and what evolved into what. And in the future as well, what will evolve from what and what will evolve into what. Regardless, the process is the same. It's still accumulation of change. And yes, there's some random change that goes on in biological evolution, but no, biological evolution is not all random. And what is a security check required? Don't know. Something on Facebook. Any rate, let's see. If you're interested in the evolution of languages, religions, cultural norms, political evolution, or anything else besides the usual evolution topics, please join my Evolution Outside of Biology group on Facebook and related Twitter discussions. And I thought that was kind of relevant to this discussion because, there's a lot of evolution going on in our society, in our politics, and so on. And we need a little more evolution in our electoral system itself, our system of elections. Here's a short video explaining in simple terms the option to cast a negative vote against a candidate when that's the voter's intention, rather than such a vote potentially being counted as support for the supposedly lesser of two evils. And that has a link to a video on balanced ballots. And here, if saying no doesn't count at all, or worse, gets counted as having said yes, can we really honestly call it democracy? The answer should be obvious. Every election, many people cast votes they think of as against a candidate rather than for one. Please help us, Bernie Sanders. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to put this all on Bernie Sanders. He's one person. He works hard. And, he's not perfect. Neither are the rest of us. But, well, we do need some help from the inside, and there isn't really a lot of help on the inside to get. So I'm hoping that Bernie Sanders will see this or hear about it and pick up some of it and run with it. Help us get that right to vote against someone, which we rightfully should have. If there's any doubt that many people cast votes intended against a specific candidate, open the Twitter search and there's another search link. Have a look through the search results as far back as you like. On any given day, there's at least a dozen or so more. Listen to them, and please listen to them. And every day, new tweets are posted talking about supposedly having voted against a specific candidate. Such votes are not supported as intended. In other words, they're not supported as votes against a candidate. And the lesser of two evils workaround is the reason we never have more than two viable candidates beyond the early primaries. An election might start out with 15, 20, 30 different candidates, but they start dropping out really fast because you end up with one candidate that appears likely to win and another candidate that appears to be the only one that can beat that one, and then they just go, well, okay, nobody can win except one of those two. And if voters would say, you know what, no, we're not accepting that. We're going to get out there and vote for who we feel is the best candidate in each position. Do the research, find the best candidate we can, and cast that vote. even if that candidate quit, if they were running and they dropped out, vote for them anyway. Let them find out. I mean, maybe you'll be the only person who did, but I'm hoping that we can get enough people doing this that we can get the word out there and talk to people and get them to realize we have the numbers. Just maybe we'll actually be able to elect one of those candidates through write-in votes. Now, some states don't allow write-ins. There are cases where that's not even an option. Do the best you can depending on what you have available. But if they won't let you write in a vote, complain about that at the very least. If you come to a situation where writing in a candidate is the best way of voting for the best candidate because they're not on the ballot, and you're not allowed to write in a candidate, well, then you're not being allowed to express your voters' intention, and that intent is what should be counted. So that would mean the system needs a little work. And here's an 18-minute video I made reading off tweets about voting against a candidate from the last 24 hours, found by the Twitter search I mentioned earlier, and there's a YouTube link. I still recommend trying the search, but I do explain a bit in the video as well. And that was from actually an older search than those other ones I made, which that last one I did was actually the older search, and then it came up later in this. Votes intended as against a specific candidate and thought of by the voter as against that specific candidate should be counted as against that specific candidate. Here's a link to another video showing tweets about voting against a candidate, and it's a second video I made reading off people's tweets on that subject. And there's that again, and the comment with it that says there was much more intended negative voting in 2016 than in 2008. But there's another typo. In both cases, all voters wanting to vote directly against a candidate were prevented from actually doing so because there's no such option on the ballot. This silencing of dissent has to be ended. And here's a tweet with the word dodo used in a rather where the use is rather obviously being used to reference not being very smart. Ironically, this is obviously a reference to the broken so-called two-party system, two-party political system, which probably should go extinct. And you can see the graphic here. It says, what if I told you that the left wing, here, let me expand that so you can see the whole thing. What if I told you that the left wing and the right wing belong to, no, what happened? It's not showing the whole thing. There it is. Belong to the same bird. Probably because I zoomed in. Twitter didn't handle the zooming in very well. But yeah, what if I told you the left wing and the right wing belong to the same bird? And somebody responded to that by saying, in some cases, the bird is obviously a dodo or a loon. So that actually got me going on the subject of the possible bringing back the dodo and other extinct animals from extinction. And I have a somewhat extensive Twitter moment on that as well. Can't help but wonder whether in the USA it's really the big two-headed political party that can be appropriately called a loon or a dodo, or if the fact that they keep fooling the general public means that collectively we're the dodo, perhaps in more ways than one. What I mean by that is basically we might be on our way to extinction. Yeah, nearly 8 billion of us. It seems like there's enough that we don't that we're kind of immune to the whole extinction thing, but Don't let it fool you. We need this planet to survive, and we need it to be habitable for us to survive. And if it becomes not survivable, that's not survivable for all of us, not just some of us. So, yeah, there could be a few survivors from that, but we just, we're better off to just try to keep that from happening in the first place. Here's a little thing on evolution again. And again, I included this stuff in there because I want people to understand what evolution is so that they can take advantage of it, because evolution can be used as a tool, and it's a very, very powerful tool. And if we want to help make the world a better place, it's a good idea to understand what the best tools are that we have available with which to do that. So imagine a computer programmer who writes version 1 of a program and then adds changes to make version 1.1, version 1.2, version 1.3, and eventually version 1.4. Of course, the name of the process of change adding up like that is evolution. But imagine if the programmer only believed microevolution was possible. After adding changes to make versions 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, and 1.9 of the program, does the program's evolution need to stop so that it doesn't reach version 2.0? No. Of course, the accumulation of change doesn't care about such superstitious nonsense. Now, what I'm talking about there, a lot of people think that evolution has cutoff points where things can evolve up to a certain point and then they can't evolve anymore. Well, evolution doesn't just stop because it reached some arbitrary point that you thought was the end of what it could do. Changes keep on accumulating, and that's true of evolution of species, of life forms, of populations, even of individuals. We humans start out as a single-celled organism, and within our own lifetimes, each one of us evolves from a single-celled organism to an adult human, which is very much multi-celled. The first step of one cell dividing and becoming more than one cell is not in and of itself evolution. That's change. But when you add another change to it, then the changes start to add up. And changes adding up is evolution. If we don't want to go the way of the dodo, perhaps we should start telling people who think there's no such thing as evolution that evolution is real, and we need as many people as possible to understand it, so that we can better guide our political and sociological evolution. Again, that's why I included that in this Twitter moment. If enough of us would stand up and fight for the right to vote against any corrupt candidate in an election, good candidates would be able to win much more easily, especially if we manage to succeed in getting such an option on our ballots. And here's another one with this sign. The text I put with this one is, if we were smart, would so many of us keep falling for the lie that voting for one of the two scariest candidates in any election is the same thing as voting against the other of those two? Even though that helps those two beat all of the good candidates we're told can't win. And that's, I don't know any stronger way to put this. I wish there was a way I could reach everyone with it, and I know I'm not going to. But when we're told that there are only two candidates that can win, or when we're presented with the appearance of there only being two candidates that can win in an election, that's almost always not actually the case. Now, it becomes effectively the case because too many people believe it is the case and act on that belief. And they're basically two major ways that people act on that belief. The worst one is the lesser of two evils voting, when people just vote for whichever one they think is the less dangerous of the two. Uh, Almost invariably, people are split about half and half on which one they think is the less dangerous. So no matter how much it seems to both sides that there's a huge difference in how dangerous each one is, it's probably not that much different. Because if it was, there would probably be a huge difference in the number of people thinking one was much more dangerous than the other. And there's generally not. Now, are they more dangerous than we think or less dangerous than we think? I don't know the answer to that. And, maybe they're not dangerous at all. Maybe they're just, well, not as good as we should do. Hover to unmute. Okay.
War and bombing and all that stuff. And then you meet with the families.
Doesn't quite fit on
the young
here.
men and women who come home from these wars and the kind of terrible suffering we have seen in our own country as a result of Iraq and Afghanistan, not to mention, the 500,000 dead in Iraq and the massive displacement of people, all of the suffering that exists. And I say, sometimes we don't see that. Sometimes we don't see that as people. But I do believe that in our heart of hearts as a people, the American people do want to see their government play a constructive, understanding how difficult it is.
I guess I got to keep my mouse over to hear
together.
that.
Get them to sit down. Get them to put away the guns and the planes and the tanks. And it is a sad thing that at this moment we're doing the exact opposite.
So yeah, hopefully.
What really bothers me.
Hopefully you'll go and find that tweet and watch that whole clip yourself. You can run a search for this text. Just put the text in quotes. Any text you see on if you want to try to find it in Twitter or somewhere on the internet, just put it in quotes so the search engine knows that you're meaning it as a phrase and not just a bunch of words. This one says, I do believe that in their heart of hearts, this was Senator Sanders wrote this, or someone wrote it for him. I'm not sure which, but this is a part of the quote of what he's saying. I do believe that in their heart of hearts, the American people want to see their government play a constructive role around the world and bring people together. That's from a Bernie town hall. And here's one of my Twitter polls. Do you believe votes intended as against the worst candidate in the USA's 2016 presidential general election were actually counted as votes against that candidate and not as votes for a different candidate? And I had a picture of this earlier, and you can see here, this is the actual Twitter poll, and there's your final results. And only 43 people voted on that. It's not a heck of a lot. I've only got about 1,000 followers in Twitter, so I wish somebody that's got like 100,000 or 1 million followers would copy some of my Twitter polls and post them on their own Twitter accounts. They definitely got my permission to do that. I'm not claiming any intellectual property rights or anything here. If you've got such an account or know somebody that does, that you can talk to about this, feel free. Ignoring the actual party affiliation, which of the following best describes your stance on USA establishment politics? And saw this one earlier also, I believe. I think we did. And here the 50% of the people answered anti-Republican out of pro-Democrat. Actually, I don't think I did have the picture of this one earlier. But 10% voted pro-Democrat, 40% voted anti-Democrat. Nobody voted pro-Republican, and half the people voted anti-Republican. Now, this is going to be slightly biased because most of the people responding to this poll were probably my Twitter followers. And now I'm not a Democrat. And so, People that like the way I think, I don't see why they would really be any more, likely to be Democrats than Republicans, except for the fact that the Republicans are, very, very obviously not trying to help the general public out. Uh, of course, the Democrats, for the most part, aren't either, but they at least claim to be and pretend to be. And in some cases, they actually are. And there are a few Republicans, I think, that are as well. I'm not going to name any names because I can't think of any off the top of my head. But nonetheless, probably out there. And here's Bernie Sanders. Our job: fight back, expand voter turnout, overturn Citizens United, fight gerrymandering, create a vibrant democracy. No. Everything he just mentioned there can be summed up in what I'm trying to get through here. We need the option to vote against someone. Fight back. How do you do that? Give people the option to vote against someone. They will be able to fight back. Trying to get the option to vote against someone is also a way of fighting back. Expand voter turnout? Well, raise awareness of the fact that the voters who generally choose not to vote could elect pretty much anyone they wanted, and that should expand voter turnout. Fight for the option to vote against someone. Raise awareness of the fact that we're lacking that option, and that voting for the lesser of two evils is causing a huge problem, but that we can overcome that problem. Even if we can't get people to stop voting for the lesser of two evils, we can overcome that problem by outvoting them. And again, if enough people hear that and believe that and act on that, then that will expand voter turnout greatly. Overturn Citizens United. Well, that's a little more complicated in how it ties in, but basically, we get more politicians in that work for the people, and that'll probably get done. And if we had the option to vote against the candidates who we felt were not going to work for us or haven't been working for us, then we would be more likely to get more candidates who actually do work for the people. Fight gerrymandering. Same thing there. Put in good politicians. They'll fix it. Now, yeah, right now, those few that are willing to try to fix it have a lot of work ahead of them to try to do that. But, hey, if we could make it a little easier for them by giving them some help, giving them some other politicians who also want to serve the people, that would be a nice thing. And create a vibrant democracy. Well, to do that, we first have to actually have a democracy. And right now, we have very little democracy in our supposedly democratic republic. It's not really democratic at all. And how could it be when people are denied the option to even vote against having a particular person represent them in a representative democracy? If you don't get to have any say in whether or not a particular person represents you, then how are they representing you? And here's another one from Bernie Sanders. Our job is to have the highest voter turnout in the world, not the lowest, or not one of the lowest. And there again, fight for the right to vote against someone. Make it happen. And here's my Write in Bernie Sanders sign. Oh, Write in Bernie Sanders, unless an option that good is actually on the ballot. If you're a potential voter in the USA and want to see the election of the best president the USA has ever had, then in 2020, vote Bernie Sanders for president, whether he's on the ballot or not. Together, we can beat the lesser of two evils votes and elect the best. And I honestly believe that. I do not believe that we're going to be able to stop the lesser of two evils votes from happening until we actually get the option to vote against someone. That will stop most of the lesser of two evils votes. A few people will still do them because they won't understand the option to vote against someone, so they just won't use it. But little by little, those people who don't understand will have the opportunity to talk with people who do understand, and will eventually, most of them should eventually figure it out. But even with all of the people that cast lesser of two evils votes still casting those votes, we can still beat those votes if the rest of us get out there and vote for someone good. And try to make sure that someone good is on the ballot. If your state doesn't allow write-ins, help somebody out there you believe is a good candidate. Do a little door knocking or whatever you can manage to do. Help make it happen. Terminology: a pro vote is a vote directly for some option or candidate, and there's a continue reading, but basically an anti-vote is a vote directly against some option or candidate. And I don't remember exactly what the question was that's on this. This is actually from Facebook. And again, if you put this in quotes, just take this, what you've got of this phrase here, and put it in quotes without the ... because I think that was added on when the text got chopped off. But just any portion of that in quotes as a phrase, and you'll probably end up finding this. Now, Facebook polls don't expire, so you can still vote in that one if you want. But just look at the way these votes are. You can see there's me and a few other people showing the pictures of. That's a picture taken from my account. So people that I know, it shows how they voted, and then people that aren't my Twitter or aren't my Facebook friends, aren't listed on my Facebook as friends. It won't show them specifically. And of course, if it runs out of room, it won't show them all anyway. But here it says plus 205 other people, and that's pro vote for Bernie Sanders, plus one, or add one vote for Bernie Sanders. Second most popular vote in this one, an anti-vote against Hillary Clinton, and that counts as -1. And here there are 10 people that voted that, so that's subtract 10 from Hillary Clinton. And then the third one is pro vote for Jill Stein, practically the same number. Fourth one is pro vote for Jane O'Meara Sanders, +7 on that. Then just below that is pro vote for Hillary Clinton. Just 2 people voted that. Anti-vote against Susan Martinez. Got one of those. Anti-vote against Rocky De La Fuente. Got one of those. Pro vote for Rocky De La Fuente. Got one of those. And an anti-vote against Donald Trump. Got one of those. Now, this was, I believe this was during the primaries when I put that one out. And the big thing going on, I mean, Donald Trump had already basically, he'd already got, I think, that if I remember the timing right on this, that Donald Trump had already basically gotten the Republican Party nomination. So this was, mainly people were looking at Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, in spite of all these other options. That's mainly what people were concentrating on. And this is kind of what I'm saying is we need to open up our minds and not do that. We need to, start looking not at who's competing against who, but rather at what are the options and which one's the best. And don't worry about the ones that aren't the best. Don't worry about the other options that might be somewhat acceptable, or maybe they're terrible, but there's someone else who's worse, or whatever. Um, there's always going to be people who are going to make that their top priorities. Comparing one to the other. That's going to be common no matter what we do. So those of us who can rise above that should. That's all I'm saying. And here's a tweet from Lee Camp. As the midterm elections get closer, the lesser of two evils debate heats up again. Which style of corporate warmongering and oppression would you like to support this year? And I don't know. If what I said to him had anything to do with that or not. I'd like to think so. I got a brief chance to talk with him after his show, and that was one of the things I mentioned to him. I said he's got a little skit that he does about being lied to, and I told him, one of the things you could add to that is, the lie that voting for the lesser of two evils is voting against evil, because it's not. And he actually did this shortly afterwards. And he had a podcast that it's called, what is the name of it? Common. What is it? Common Censor, I think it was. Yeah, I think that's the title of the podcast. So, do I still have that open somewhere? I can double check the name of it. No, apparently not. Any rate, so moving on. Politics. The art of convincing decent people to forget the lesser of two evils is also evil. Edward Snowden. TheFreeThoughtProject.com. And that's Sheila replying to Lee Camp. The lesser of two evils is also evil. And here's another one from Lee Camp. Human beings are very good at avoiding pain by subconsciously using tricks such as rationalization. Many of us are now telling ourselves that things aren't that bad. The environment will survive. Everything will work out. It won't, unless we wake up. And yeah, I agree with you, Lee. I've been trying since 1969 to get the people to wake up to the fact that we really need the option to vote against someone. Help me out with that if you would. I'd appreciate it. Sadly, the efforts of those promoting better options are easily buried by those who promote voting for candidates they don't even want, as supposedly the only way of beating some candidate they're afraid will get elected otherwise. We need the option to vote against a candidate. Oh, here's a little meme I made. Do you believe in humans? And this ties into the subject here in a rather strange way. I don't know. See if you can follow this. Anti-theism is the opposite of theism, or an opposition to theism. Could be, either one, depending on basically which way you take the prefix anti. That is believing. I'm missing a word there. I should say believing there is no such thing as gods, just as believing is no such thing as gods, or being against a god or against God beliefs. Atheism is the lack of theism. That is, not believing the claim that there is such a thing as God, as a God. In other words, lacking God belief. To those who insist that all atheists disbelieve in their God or are against their God, as if not being a theist automatically makes one an anti theist, I present the following question: do you believe everyone who's not a humanist is an anti humanist? In other words, if you're not a humanist, are you against humans? Or do you simply think there's no such thing as a human? Yeah, I know, silly question. As silly as assuming that all atheists either hate some God or know for a fact that there isn't some God hiding out there somewhere while letting millions of theists run around giving away their secrets. Or both. And this really does come down to a lot of people really have trouble telling the difference between opposites and just different, or between opposites and a lack of, and the opposite of something and a lack of something. Uh, we're not good at opposites. And, you look at mathematics when it comes to negative numbers. We're Children are still being taught in a lot of schools at a young age that you can't subtract a larger number from a smaller one. Can't be done. And then they let them think that. They let that sink in for a while before they finally tell them, okay, now you're going to have to subtract larger numbers from smaller ones. But since we told you can't do that, what you're going to do is you're going to turn it around and subtract the smaller one from the larger one and then change the sign of the result. In other words, you're substituting in the same sense as, when you want to vote against a particular candidate, you substitute voting for a different candidate. Except there's one problem. And that's the fact that the negative of a negative is a positive in mathematics. But voting for the lesser of two evils is not the negative of a negative. It's throwing that negative away and replacing it with a positive that's really not even related. It's kind of like saying, hey, I've got too many apples in my shopping cart. I need to take some apples out. And somebody says, okay, here, I'll dump in a bag of oranges. That doesn't help. If you wanted to remove apples, remove apples. Don't add oranges. Not the same thing. And here's that survey again. Little text attached to it, and that's actually that earlier one I was talking about. Made that some time ago. You can see there's 14 people have retweeted it, and 16 people have liked it. I should retweet it. As I'm here. There. Now I retweeted it too. So now 15 people have retweeted it. And it says, imagine having an actual democracy instead of a constant reminder that democracy is what we're supposed to have. Please share this meme to help make it happen. And there's some hashtags. And here's basically the same screen, decorated up a bit, cleaned up a little. The text was a bit blurry, so I replaced the text and did a little fade background. Didn't have the greatest tools to work with, but I managed to get it done. And the text I put on that one, at Bernie Sanders, I think I read this earlier, but I'll read it again anyway because I think I'm at the end of this. At Bernie Sanders, we the people of the United States of America need balanced ballots with the option to actually vote directly against a candidate. Then those votes will no longer turn into votes for the lesser of two evils. Read more, and there's the link. And that link goes here to this moment. So kind of come full circle. All right. So, yeah. I guess that's pretty much all I have to say for now. and I clicked on the link, and it's just leaving the screen blank. There it is. So that's back at the beginning of the Twitter moment. And thanks for watching. Much appreciated. And hey, if you do get into the Twitter moment, I'd appreciate it if you click this like button. So far, there's only me and one other person that liked it. The Expanse Coffee. There at REID_CO. So that person was nice enough to do that. And I just got a message in here. Okay, I'm going to close this out and then check this message. Thanks.